Okay. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see everyone here and be part of the Nuxt Nation. So today I'm going to talk about authentication in Nuxt applications. If you don't know me or if you already forgot what she said 10 seconds ago, I'm Sebastian Chopin and I'm a French developer. I am the creator of Nuxt and CEO at Nuxt Labs. At Nuxt Labs, we sponsor and contribute to Nuxt development as well as building products around it. You may know some of them. You can build beautiful and responsive applications with Nuxt UI Pro, the extension of our open source UI library for Vue and Nuxt called Nuxt UI. You can also let your team edit your Nuxt content website using Nuxt Studio. And you can finally build a full stack application on the edge with Nuxt Hub. Those are optional products that you can use if you want to help us contribute to Nuxt and if it solves a problem for you. If you want to find me on the social media, all you have to remember is my username. It's @Nuxt, and this is where you can find me. So what is authentication? It's the process of verifying a user identity, and let's keep only user here, to know if they should have access to specific web pages. It can be through credentials, email password, social login, API tokens, and more. Let's talk about the existing auth solution for Nuxt 3 and 4. First, we have the Nuxt use cookie composable that you can use already without installing anything. And this is actually what the Strapi and Directus modules uses to add authentication. Next, we have the auth module made by the Sidebase team, supporting the Auth.js library and local strategies. It supports many OAuth providers by Auth.js. It supports credential with the email and password for sign up and sign in. It also has the auth middleware to easily protect your pages. On the other part, we have Better Auth, which is a new agnostic TypeScript library that is compatible with Nuxt. It is made for full stack applications that are shipped with a database and also a secondary storage. It also supports OAuth, credential, magic link, and more. And lastly, we have Nuxt.utils, which is a Nuxt module that adds authentication helpers to your Nuxt application. I'm going to talk about this one today because it's the one I created and I'm the most comfortable with, but those are valid solutions depending on your needs. So Nuxt.utils leverage secured and sealed cookies to manage user sessions. I released it a year ago. It is open source and now have more than 900 stars on GitHub. In a year, I've seen more than 100 pull requests, so it's less than one every 3 days, but still it's nice to see the community engaging. It's actually a pull request from 50 different contributors around the world. So thank you for helping me shaping this Nuxt module. And today it's downloaded more than 32,000 times per month. So let's talk about the Nuxt.utils features. First, and it's very important to me, as you know, Nuxt 3 supports hybrid rendering. And Nuxt.util works with this strategy. So you can have a page with SSR, another page with SPA, so no SSR, another one which is cached, another one which is pre-rendered at build time. Nuxt.utils will support the different stage, different mode of your page, and will load at the right time. We also support more than 20 OAuth providers. We support the passwordless authentication using the WebAuth standard. So it's good if you have modern technologies such as an iPhone, if you want this Face ID or the fingerprint or YubiKey, etc. It has several helpers to hash and verify password that works everywhere. It is written in TypeScript and support type augmentation. Of course, it's made to run in all JavaScript runtimes, from Node.js to Cloudflare workers. But one thing to notice is that you need a server in order to encrypt the cookies in our API route. So it does not work with Nuxt Generate, but you can still pre-render all your pages if you use modern deployment platforms such as Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare Pages, Nuxt Hub. You can pre-render the pages, but keep the server running so your API route can work. So it will also work with Nuxt.utils. And the installation is quite simple. First, you install the module using the famous npx Nuxt module add command with .utils as the module name. It will add the package, it will install the package with your favorite package manager and add it into your nuxt.config.ts file. Then, it's not required in development, but it's nice to get used to it. You create a password, a random string of at least 32 characters, and you add it to your .env. It's what we will use to encrypt the session, and that's it. You can start using various server helpers or view composable provided by the module. Let's start by creating a server API route. So this route is living on /API/login and only accept post request. This is why we have this .post.ts suffix in the file name. We export an event handler as the Nuxt server is running Nitro. So define event handler is a H3 server util. H3 is the server used by Nitro and Nitro is used by Nuxt. First, we are reading our body by calling read body with the event, and we get back our password. We are checking here if the password is admin, and if it's good, then we create our user session. Set user session will set a cookie. Obviously, please don't do this. You should not have the password coded in the hard-coded in your code. You may use environment variable or different technique, but this is for demo purpose. And if the password is wrong, we call the create helper, the 4.1 static code, and a wrong password message. Now let's take a look at the view composable. So we have our API route. Now we have our use user session composable that expose many variables. We have the logged in, which is a computed, indicating if the user is logged in. Basically, it's checking if the user object is different than null, which is also computed. We have the session object, which includes the user object, but also additional fields, like when the session was created and etc. We have a fetch method that allows you to refresh the user session on client side by calling an API, internal API endpoint exposed by Nuxt.utils, and a clear function that same will remove the cookie and clear the user and logged in computed variables. Now let's work on our view page that use our login API route. So first we get the properties and we need to create the password ref. Then we create our function, which is making an API call to our /API/login route, giving the password as a body. And we refresh if the API call is valid, we refresh our user session. Then some HTML here. If we are logged in, we say hello admin with a button to clear the session. Otherwise, we display a form to log in with a password. Let's see how the code looks like. So if I enter the right password, we can see that if I enter the wrong password, I can see the 4.1 status code. And if I enter the right password, we can see our valid API login endpoint and the second API call made to the session endpoint. So again, if I log in with the wrong password, I can see my 4.1 status code. This video is quite fast. And if I log in with the admin password, you can see that it answered with a success, and we have another call to fetch our session. So now let's have a look at how sealed cookie works. So when we call our /API login endpoint, the set user session will encrypt the object we give it to using Iron Crypto, using our Nuxt session password environment variable. It will also add the set cookie header to our request. And then the client, the browser, will store the cookie with HTTP only. By opening the Chrome DevTools, we can see our sealed cookie with the Nuxt session name. We can also see here that it's HTTP only, the same city is Lux, and in production, as most of the websites run with HTTPS, it's also secured. So now let's see how it works when reading the cookie on the app side. So when we call the user session composable.fetch, the session endpoint will be called. This endpoint is ID'd by the Nuxt utils module. It will decrypt the session data using the Nuxt session password environment variable. Then, before returning the session data, the endpoint call the fetch hook on the server, so you can extend the session data by creating a server plugin, waiting for this hook to be called, so you can fetch the user avatar, user email, anything that you need to display on your front end, but it's not necessary to be encrypted in the cookie for the server. And lastly, we delete the secure property from the session data, so only public data is sent back to the front end. If we take a look here at the API out session API call done on client side, we get our session data with the user inside it. You don't need to call user session.fetch at the beginning, as Nuxt.utils do it for you. So we have a server plugin that will call the session for you, so you have access to the authenticated user directly by calling the composable at the top level component, which is app.view. So let's see the benefits and drawbacks of the sealed cookie approach. The maximum size is 4 kilobytes. This means that you should only store the data you need on several API routes, like the user ID, for instance, and then use the fetch hook to add more data that is needed for the front end. The cookie are stored with HTTP only, so only JavaScript JavaScript cannot read its value. Quite useful to bypass XSS attacks. The cookie are only set as secure, so it cannot be sent over HTTP, also avoiding man-in-the-middle attacks. By default, we are setting same-site Lux to mitigate cross-site request forgery attacks. And you can customize all the session and cookies option using the runtime config. Here, I'm setting the max age to 1 week. To store private session data, like I mentioned earlier, you can use the secure property. In API route, you can read session.secure, but on the app side, session.value.secure will be undefined. It's quite similar to the runtime config and public runtime config in Nuxt. TypeScript support. As Nuxt.util is written in TypeScript, we also allow type augmentation for the user session. All you have to do is to create a out.d.ts file. It's documented in the README, and you can specify the types of your user object, the user session object, and the secure property. This will obviously provide autocomplete in your backend and your frontend. To add social authentication, Nuxt.utils provide 3 shakeable Nitro server handler for each provider it supports. So it looks like this. The function define OAuth Google event handler. The function expect an object with a required onSuccess callback, an optional config, and an optional onError callback. You can find the list of the supported OAuth providers we support, Google, GitHub, Microsoft being the most popular. Let's see an example of a GitHub OAuth application. First, we need to add our GitHub application client ID and client secret as environment variable. Next, we create, this time it's not exactly an API route, it's a Nitro server route. So server/route/auth/GitHub. .get suffix will will only accept a GET request. So here we're creating the /auth/GitHub endpoint. We add our on success callback. We get here the user and tokens back from the GitHub auth flow. Here we are storing only the user login and we keep the user access token in the secure property. Lastly, we redirect our user back to the home page. So how does it look like on the front end? Here I'm using the use user session to know if the user is authenticated. If he's authenticated, I'm saying hello username. And otherwise, I'm using a link to go to the /auth/GitHub. I cannot use the Nuxt Club link here as it's not a view page, but a Nitro route. So let's see how it looks in video. So by clicking on the link, we are redirected to the GitHub OAuth page, which then redirect us back to our auth GitHub endpoint, which then set the cookie and finally redirect us to the home page. So it was quite fast, but once we redirected back to the home page, we already have this user state. So quite simple and useful. And we didn't use any database here. So you can add GitHub authentication very easily to your Nuxt application. You simply have to create a GitHub app, which is maybe the longest part of the process. Nuxt.utils also expose more server utils, such as a way to replace the whole user session, because by default, said user session will extend the data. Sorry. You can get the current session to know if an API call is authenticated or not. You can clear the user session and tell the browser to remove the next session cookie. We have an internal API endpoint which does this, also called a hook. So you may not have to use it for this. And if you want to protect an API route by throwing a 4-1 if the API call is not authenticated, I highly recommend you to use the require user session. It acts as a middleware, but I don't recommend to use server middleware as it can slow down your server. It's better to have a scope of each API, and within each API endpoint, you require the user session or not, which is at the end, you'll find it more enjoyable to use than hacking into a server middleware to add specific condition that on that API endpoint, you should not be authenticated. So password hashing, if you plan to let users sign up and sign in with email and password, we expose a hash password server function to safely hash a password to store in your database later on. It uses a script under the hood, so it can work on all JavaScript runtime. And you can use the verify password server function to time safely check the validity of the entered password against your stored hash password. And you can customize the script options using your Nuxt config file. Nuxt.utils also add support to the WebAuth standards to add passwordless authentication. I would like to thank Gerben Mulder for implementing this feature because it was not an easy one. So how it works? First, you install the peer dependencies, which are a simple WebAuth server and simple WebAuth browser. Then you enable the WebAuth an option in your Nuxt config. So this will add the view composable and server utils to your application. Next, we are creating here a /webauth/register post API endpoint. And similar to OAuth, you use the define webauth register event handler, and you give a onSuccess callback. Let's pretend here that I'm inserting my user into my database. So user will always have the .username property, which is a standard for webauth n. And finally, here I'm setting my user session. I don't need to redirect because here this API call will be done on client side. On the front end, we can get the register function by by calling the use webauth n composable. By default, it's /API/webauth n/register. We also have the login functionality, but I don't have the time to showcase how it works here. Highly recommend you to check out the documentation, the README. Here, I want to sign up with an email, and I'm creating this sign up function, which will be used by my form that is calling the register function. And then I'm refreshing my user session. And some HTML here. If we're connected, I'm displaying the email. Otherwise, similar to the password, I have a form with the email. And let's see the final result in video. Let's sign up with email. Confirm the sign up. So let's sign up with email. Confirm the sign up using the Chrome profile here and using my fingerprint. It's all good now. We can see in the network tab, the API call to the register and session endpoints. So that was this simple to add passwordless authentication to your Nuxt application. As you may know, like I mentioned earlier, Nuxt 3 comes with the hybrid rendering, meaning that you can specify that some pages of your app are pre-rendered, some other are without server-side rendering, etc. Nuxt or utils knows about the state of the specific page when it's loading, and will load the session on client side if it couldn't load it on server side, while avoiding hydration errors, as we all hate those. This is how it looks like. I have my pre-rendered landing page. So this is page index.view. We can see in our header 2 buttons that are conditionally displayed if I'm logged in or not. Let's see how it looks after building my website for productions. For this demo, I'm using 4G network emulation to properly see what is happening. Let's log in and come back to our home page on client side. This is good. If I refresh, we can see that because the page was pre-rendered, it didn't know about the auth state. So by default, when you pre-render the page or you cache them, we remove the cookies. So it will always be in an unauthenticated state, thankfully. But this is not great in terms of user experience. So for this, we have a component to solve that. So let's go back to our buttons here and wrap them with the auth state component that Nuxt auth utils expose. And we can also add a placeholder template slot to customize what is rendered when the authentication state is unknown. By default, it would be empty, so only the button will be displayed. The login or logout button will be displayed after hydration when we know the authentication state. But here, let's display a disable button and the 3 dots, so we pretend it's loading. Let's build our application again, pre-render the landing page, and test it. If I refresh the landing page right away, we can see our disabled button. Let's log in and go back to our home page. And if I refresh now, we can see our disabled button and the logout. So this is much nicer. It can be better, of course, but this is up to you and your design. I've seen many websites using um, a visibility hidden and doing a fade in once you're logged in. So we fade in the avatar or we fade in the login button, and it's not an issue, but you can pre-render your pages and have maximum performance this way. Very useful for marketing pages while having a header with the hot state. What's coming for V1? So right now the repository is on /@linux/nuxt-hot/utils. Dash utils, yes. Session storage. We are working on adding the possibility to plug a session storage. Why? Because it will allow you to revoke or allow your users also to revoke other user sessions remotely. Like I'm on my desktop and I see I'm also connected on my old phone that is not working anymore. I can, or I just give it to my sister. I can disconnect from that device. So we are working and profiling the API right now, and also bypass the 4 kilobyte limits of cookies. I will also add a hot middleware, even though today it's very easy to create your own hot middleware. I'm thinking of giving it a default one where you can specify if this page is for guest only, what do you redirect the user if it's connected or not. More OAuth providers, Apple, Blue Sky are on the list. The pull request is more than welcome. Actually, I think 18 or 17 OAuth provider has been implemented by the community. So please go ahead. It's very easy to implement. You can copy one of them and rename and adapt to the provider. A documentation website, because now the README is way too long. So I think it's time to have a proper documentation website for this. And lastly, I will open an RFC to ask the community about the feedback and if there is any blocker for you to see before migrating to @nuxt/hotutils. Also, why not just Nuxt Hot? Because it's, like I mentioned in the panel yesterday, it's very hard to support all the hot mechanisms. I believe providing right utils and right recipes and documentation is the way to go to let you add proper authentication to your Nuxt application. I would like to thank you for testing Nuxt.utils for the past year and giving me your feedback. A huge thank you to other people who contributed to it and made the library possible today. And of course, thank you here in the live stream for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed it and that you're now ready to implement Auth in your next application. Thank you.
Yay, thank you. And we do have some audience questions for you. All right. To start with the first one, was better.auth.com a candidate to base Nuxt Auth on? If not, why? Was it too fresh at the time?
So I released a template a week ago, I think it was last week, using Nuxt Hub with Better Auth. I tested it for, I think, 3 weeks. I made pull requests to Better Auth. I think it's a good library, but same, it depends of your need. Here, it's based on a database. It's for full stack implementation, where here you don't need a database to use authentication. Yeah, I don't force you to use a database. So I will keep helping the maintainer and creator of Better Auth to work on a Nuxt module. So you will also have a solution if you want to go full stack, but it won't be an official solution. But it's definitely something to check out because it's very good, and I think it will be out of beta the 21st of November.
Yay, that's soon. Exciting, next week. All right. How are Nuxt Auth and user management, including Teams, multi-tenancy, connected to each other from your perspective?
That's a good question. Right now, Nuxt.util is for user session management. That's why I don't call it use hot directly. Teams multi-tenancy, and it's two different subjects. Teams, you need most of the time a database to handle. Multi-tenancy is for a different domain, if I'm not mistaken. So um, I don't know, honestly. It's hard to answer this one. Um, it depends on the project you build. In my opinion, you can do anything, everything with Nuxt and the Nitro utils, and you can build upon with Nuxt hot utils. You can do all of those. For instance, I'm building the whole platform of Nuxt Hub using Nuxt hot utils, so it's possible. Um, Honestly, you have to try. Feel free to open an issue with a small demo reproduction you have or what you're trying to achieve, and I'll be more than happy to help you on this.
Thank you. All right. Is there any way to create a custom provider?
We soon plan to expose the OAuth utils we have, so you can create your own custom provider easily. But feel free to comment on the open issue we have, and so we can prioritize this issue over the others.
Great. Thank you. Uh, can you integrate the Nuxt auth utils module at the backend with kind? If Nuxt is restarted on the backend, are all user sessions lost after the server restart?
Can you integrate this next utils module at the backend with Kinder? If next in the backend. I don't know much about the Kind implementation, Kinder implementation. I know Daniel Rowe worked on this module. I'm not sure if you need to add the hot utils layer on top of it, but I think it's possible if you need to. But I don't think the user session will be lost. I don't know how Kind supports multiple user session and how it works, but same here. If you have a small demo or usage, I can properly help by seeing code.
Thank you. And last question. How would you implement session refresh with an OAuth provider like Microsoft?
I'm in discussion with someone working also with session refresh. I would definitely store the tokens in the session or in database if it's needed. And I would also add a wrapper on top of my API call where I use this token. And if I get, and I would use a, a hook, if this API call throw me a 4.1 error because it needs to refresh, I will refresh it and call again this function. But definitely a recipe to write because just telling it out loud, it's not that easy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Thank you so much, Sebastian, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, y'all. Up next, we have break time. So make sure you share all your social medias in the chat. Go check out Bitter Brains, see what they're up to, and all of our other sponsors. There we go, sponsors in the expo. So go check that out and see you back soon.